This is the complete step-by-step guide on how to build a fire gaming PC using the Corsair 3500X case in this awesome stealthy black color. All the components will be listed in the description down below, along with affiliate links which help and support the Firewolf Tech channel. But just the time that you spend watching my videos, commenting, and hopefully subscribing is more than enough to support my channel, so thank you. Starting off with the components, the CPU I'll be using is the Ryzen 7 9800X 3D, which will be paired up with the ROG Astral 5080 GPU. For the motherboard, I'll be using the ROG STRIX X870E-E, but you can use any standard ATX motherboard, just make sure it's compatible for your CPU. For cooling, I went with the NZXT Kraken Elite 360, one of my all-time favorite AIOs with its massive LCD screen and RGB lighting. For RAM, I went with 32 gigs of the G.Skill Trident Z5 Neo RGB in black. Just make sure you check your specific motherboard's QVL list to ensure whichever RAM you go for is compatible. For NVMe storage, I went with the Samsung 9100 Pro, which features amazing Gen 5 speeds, and for additional storage, the 990 Pro is also a great choice for a solid Gen 4 SSD. For fans, I went with the Lian Li TL wireless fans. The top 3 fans attached to the AIO are standard blade, while the rear fan is also standard blade but with an LCD screen, while the side and bottom fans are reverse blades that also have LCD screens. You can mix and match LCD and non-LCD fans, so the choice is yours. Powering this build is going to be the ROG STRIX 1200 watt Platinum PSU, which is definitely overkill, so I recommend using a PSU calculator to give you an idea of how many watts you actually need for your specific components. I personally like having a bit extra headroom. Optional accessories, but could be needed, is going to be a powered internal USB hub, especially if you're going for the LCD fans, and finally the Lian Li Strimer RGB cables to give it some more flair. So with all the components out of the way, first thing we're setting up is the motherboard. I have the ROG Strix X870E-E, which is a beautiful all black motherboard. In this step, we'll be installing our CPU, our NVMe SSD, and our RAM. Starting off with the CPU right on the center here, you want to drop this latch down to the right, pull this latch all the way up, and you can lift the cover up, revealing these socket pins. Next, you want to go ahead and grab your CPU. Be very careful. I would recommend opening this up away from the motherboard. I'm going to be extremely cautious as my camera is right on top. And whenever you're holding your AM5 processor, you want to make sure you locate the triangle on the top left. We're just going to match the triangle on the top left of the socket as well. And you're going to notice some notches on the bottom and top that you also want to line up as well. Once you're ready, gently drop it down very close to the socket. I like to position it all the way to the left. And then you can drop it down. Give it a little wiggle, making sure it is perfectly aligned. Then you can drop the cover down. I recommend placing a hand on the motherboard, and then you can drop this latch down. There's going to be some resistance, but go ahead and push through. Then you can take this cover out of the way and save it just in case. Next thing we're setting up is our RAM. I'll be using the G.Skill Trident Z5 Neo RGB in black, which is going to match this all black aesthetic. Now our RAM is going to go on this section of the motherboard here. However, if you're only going to be using 2 RAM sticks like I am, you want to make sure you populate the 2nd and 4th DIMM slot, which is labeled A2 and B2. Once you know that, you can go ahead and start dropping these latches down. So I'm dropping the 2nd slot and then the 4th slot. Now, depending on your motherboard, you may have additional latches on the bottom that you can also drop down. So I'm going to drop the 2nd one again and the 4th one as well. And next thing here is we're going to grab our RAM. You're going to locate the notch over here. And you want to basically line that up with this middle silver trim and make sure that lines up. You'll notice that it does not line up. But if I were to flip it over, you're going to notice that they now line up. So this is the correct orientation. So once you know that, go ahead and slide it over. And all you need to do is apply pressure twice. So starting off from the top, and hear a click, and the bottom, and that's the 2nd click. We're gonna do the same thing with our 2nd RAM. Make sure the notches line up, of course. Go ahead and pull it through. 2 clicks, 1, 2. And now our RAM is successfully installed. Alright, now we're ready to install our NVMe SSDs. In this scenario, I'll be installing 2 NVMe SSDs. One of them is going to be the Samsung 9100 Pro, which is a Gen 5, which this motherboard does support. And the second one is going to be a 990 Pro, which is going to be Gen 4. One thing you should know about your NVMe SSD is whether or not you have a double-sided or a single-sided SSD. In the case of this particular 9100 Pro, if I rotate it to the side, you'll notice all these components are on one side, and if you go on the back, it is pretty much completely flat, meaning that this is going to be a single-sided NVMe. And the reason why you want to know that is because your motherboard may include these additional rubber pieces, and these are called M.2 rubber pieces, and they're made for single-sided NVMe to give better contact to the actual heat sinks. So make sure you refer to your motherboard's manual. Now on this motherboard, the primary NVMe is going to be this one right over here, and this one actually has a push mechanism, so no tools are required. So all I have to do really is just push this, and this whole piece comes right off, which makes it very convenient. So if you're only installing one NVMe SSD, this is the only one you need to focus. For the additional M.2s, there are two located on these two separate heat sinks, and the final two are located right on the bottom. Now I do need to use a screwdriver to reveal the additional M.2s, so I'm going to go ahead and quickly unscrew them. So starting off with the top. Now this whole piece is held by 4 screws, so make sure you unscrew all 4 screws, and this huge heatsink can be separated. I'm going to put that on the side, and then for the final one is going to be right on the bottom with just 2 screws. And that just lifts up very easily. Now that we have our heatsinks out of the way, this motherboard has a total of 5 M.2 sockets, with the top 3 supporting up to Gen 5, and they're integrated directly to the CPU, giving you maximum performance. The bottom 2 support up to Gen 4, and these actually connect to the chipset and then routed to the CPU, so you may not get the best performance since it's not directly connected to the CPU. Now, although these 3 support up to Gen 5, it's important to know that on this particular motherboard, these 2 Gen 5 M.2 sockets share bandwidth with this express slot. So if I populate an NVMe on either one of these, this express slot automatically reduces in half and only runs up to Gen 5 X8. If you want your GPU to have maximum bandwidth, then make sure you don't install any other M.2s over here. Or if you want maximum M.2 performance, then you want to populate these, of course, because they are integrated into the CPU. Now, our primary slots that supports Gen 5, this one does not share, so I can safely populate an M.2 here, doesn't touch this at all. So now we're ready to install our NVMe SSDs, and like I referenced earlier, if your motherboard has these M.2 rubber pieces, make sure you use this if you have a single-sided NVMe. So my 9100 Pro being a Gen 5, I'm going to populate that on the primary M.2 socket, which is right over here. Now you're going to notice a sticker like this, so make sure you completely remove that. And finally, you're going to see these 2 screw holes, and this M.2 rubber kind of looks like a Lego piece, and all I have to do is just place it right over there. And I'm going to need a total of 2. Literally fits just like Lego pieces. And next I grab my NVMe SSD, I locate this little notch, and I line it with that notch right over there. So all I have to do is just position this in an angle, push that right in, and then I can push this NVMe all the way down, and that locks in, no tools at all, which makes it very convenient. Next NVMe that I'm installing is this 990 Pro, and like I said earlier, I'm going to use the bottom one since it does not share bandwidth with the main express slot. Remember, we do have to apply the M.2 rubber, and so make sure you grab your rubber piece, and that goes right over there. You can see it has like a little circle. You just easily just place that in right there, and again, this is only for single-sided NVMe SSDs. Then I grab my NVMe, I locate the notch, mash that up with this little socket over here, and you can put it in any one, left or right. So I'm gonna go push that in. And then on this one, it's a little bit different. I do have to push this gray tab down, push this SSD all the way down, and then I can let go, and that locks into place. Now you're ready to reinstall our M.2 heatsink here, and this is the primary one, so that's gonna go right over here. Now go ahead and flip it over. You should see a sticker here that you need to remove to reveal this thermal pad. Make sure you remove that. And this is very easy. All I have to do is angle this left side right over here, and then all I have to do is push. For any additional ones, we do have to take our heatsinks and screw them in, but make sure you turn them over and remove these if you're going to be using M.2s on these sockets. I'm personally not, so I'm just going to go ahead and rescrew it. All right, and for my final heatsink cover here, once again, you want to make sure you flip it and remove this sticker completely. Since it's on the left side, I already removed it already. So this is the only one that I need to remove, and I can just place it right over and screw it in. All right, and just like that, our motherboard is about 95% done. The last thing that we're gonna do here is remove these original pieces here to replace that with whatever bracket your AIO might use, but I like to cover that part when I install the actual AIO. So for now, we're going to place the motherboard to the side, and we're now ready to prepare our case. All right, now we're ready to prep up our 3500X. The first thing we're gonna do is remove all of the removable panels to make it easier for us to install all of our awesome components. So first things first is our side glass panel. There is an indentation right over here. You just have to pull it towards you. And then you can just lift this whole panel out of the way. All right, after that, go ahead and remove this box. These are all of our accessories. We're gonna be using that later on. Next thing we're gonna do here is tackle our front glass piece. And the same thing here, we just pull it towards us. Lift it up. All right, moving on, we have our back panel. Same thing here, there is an indentation right over here. We just pull it towards us. This whole back piece comes off. All right, and the last removable panel will be the top right over here. We just have to pull this up and this whole piece comes right off. All right, now that we have all the panels removed, now we can start installing our motherboard on the case. So go ahead and lay your case flat down and I'll meet you guys up there. Now that we have our case laying flat down, we're now ready to install our motherboard directly on our case. There's a total of 9 standoffs, with the one in the center being a little bit more raised, and that's what's going to hold it in place before you screw it in. So once you're ready, go ahead and grab your motherboard carefully. And I like to position my opposite hand in the IO opening over here. So that way, as I'm dropping it down, I use my opposite hand to grab this portion, and then I can just guide it to the center. You basically want to feel the middle. And once you feel the middle screw point, you'll notice that your motherboard is now locked into place. You won't be able to wiggle it. Now inside your accessory toolkit, it's going to come with different sets of screws. And the ones that we're looking for are the motherboard screws. And they're the ones in the middle. They have like a more rounded circle appearance. So go ahead and rip apart. So they look just like this. They're basically rounded, and you want to grab a total of 9. And you're going to take your screwdriver and you're going to screw all 9 in across your whole motherboard. All right, now we're on our final screw, and here is a tip depending on which motherboard you have. The middle screw hole might be blocked by your M.2 heatsink if your motherboard has one of those really long and large heatsinks. If you want to screw in the middle screw, you do have to remove that heatsink so that the screw hole gets exposed. However, on this motherboard, there's no need since the screw hole is wide open, and I can go ahead and screw in that final screw. All right, just like that, we have our motherboard successfully installed. Go ahead and lift your case all the way up. Now that we have our motherboard installed, the next step here is to install our PC panel connectors directly to the motherboard, since we have a whole bunch of open space. So let's go ahead and rotate the case. All right, and your PC panel connectors are these cables here. They basically connect to these connectors up here. So your power button and your USBs and all that good stuff. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to undo these. All right, so the first connector we're going to work on is our front panel connector, and this controls the power switch of this case, and that's going to go on the bottom left. And so there are openings right on the bottom here, so go ahead and pass the cable through. Just pull it through, we'll connect that later on. Next connector is going to be our HD audio, and this is for the 3.5mm jack on top of the case, and that's going to go on the bottom right. So same thing here, go pull this through the opening over here. Next connector is going to be the thickest one. This is for the USB-A, and generally these are on the middle of your motherboard on this side. Some of them can be on the bottom as well, so reference your motherboard's layout, but I'm going to go ahead and pass it through right over here in this channel. And the final connector here is going to be our USB-C connector here. If for whatever reason your motherboard does not have this type of connector, then you can go ahead and disregard. So we're going to pass that through right on the top here, because on this motherboard the USB-C is on the top center. Now that we have all the cables passed through, flip your case. All right, first connector that we're going to work on is the USB-C connector. And once again, you want to reference your motherboard's layout that's found in the manual to easily identify where each of these connectors are. But generally, you're looking for this style of connector over here. So once you find it, go ahead and connect it in. It only goes one way, so make sure you find the right one and then go ahead and push it through. And then you can start tucking these cables back in. The next one that we're going to work on is our USB-A connector, and that's going to be this connector right over here. Some motherboards might have it as a right angle, so for this connector you want to match the notch, which is right over here, to the notch on the actual connector. So once you find that, go ahead and line it up, push it in. All right, and next connector is going to be our front panel connector, and that's going to be positioned on the bottom right of your motherboard. And with this connector, we have 9 pin openings with 1 missing. So you just have to match where the missing pin is. On this motherboard, the missing pin is on the top right. So make sure you line that up, and you can go ahead and start connecting that in. All right, and front panel is in. All right, and finally our HD audio, that's gonna be on the bottom left. And that's gonna be this connector right over here. And similar to the front panel, we have a total of 9 pin openings with 1 missing in a different position. So make sure you match up wherever that missing pin is. On this motherboard, the missing pin is on the top right. So go ahead and line up those pins and connect it through. All right, and before moving on, I wanna give you a close-up of all of the cables that we have. Right on the top, we have our USB-C, followed by our USB-A, which on this motherboard is actually an additional connector right over here. So I could also connect this down over here as a right angle. Then we have the front panel, which is right over there. And finally, our HD audio. All right, next thing that we're gonna start installing are our fans. And I'm gonna first start off with our side fans. Since you want the air coming in, make sure you pick up reverse blades specifically for your sides and your bottom fans as well. Another thing I do recommend, whether you're going for the LCD or non-LCD, is making sure you pick up at least 1 3-pack of either the reverse blade or standard, whichever one you do. Try to get yourself at least 1 3-pack, because the 3-pack is going to give you this SATA to 3-way power connector, and realistically you only need 1, and this applies supplementary power when you have more than 1 of these fans daisy chain. So we really only need a set of 3 anyways. And the awesome thing about these TL fans is that they're very easy to daisy chain. You notice on one side we have some tabs, and on the other end we have openings for that tab to go in. So all we have to do is just put them together and interlock it, so that way it locks into place. And same thing here for our last fan. All right, now we have 3 fans that are daisy chained, and they all share just 1 wireless receiver, which I'll show you exactly how to install. The next step here is to flip it over and remove these corner tabs, which will reveal the screw holes that's needed to screw them in. So you want to do that on each of these corners, just on the back. All right, once you're done, the next step here is to grab our screws. And inside the box of the Unifans, you're going to get a set of case fan screws. You also get case fan screws inside the Corsair box as well. So these are all extras. So I'm going to use the ones that are included on the Lian Li fans. Go ahead and grab your case and rotate it. And the next thing you want to do is attach the L wireless receiver. And you're going to position that right on top of the male end, making sure that the tabs is facing the right side. Then once you have it in, go ahead and push it to the right, and that locks it into place. Now you'll notice that these cables are going to the left side, and I want it facing the opposite side. So to do that, I can actually remove this tab. Pops right out. Then you can take this cable out, flip it over, tuck it back into the other side, and then you can go ahead and reattach the clip. Just like that. And now we have this cable now going to the opposite side. And then go ahead and grab the set of fans. And I recommend you start feeding these cables right on top. There's a huge opening right over here. All right, now that we have that fed, go ahead and start positioning your fan right on top. If you want, you can drop it momentarily if you want. It should hold into place. The next thing you want to do is start grabbing your screwdriver and having a case fan screw ready. And then go ahead and grab your fans, and you can start playing with the position of your fans. And once you're ready, go ahead and start screwing them in. I personally like to screw in each opposite corner. That way you can quickly take a look at the position of the fans, and if you're satisfied with that, you can just continue screwing the rest of the screws. All right, and I slightly lowered it just a little bit to be a little bit more in the center. And we can go ahead and rotate the case to see how it looks. And this is how we're looking so far with our 3 reverse blade LCD fans. So that way you'll be able to see all the LCD screens front and center, while having reverse blade, meaning that you're bringing in cold air inside the case. Keep in mind that we do have the receiver right on top, And again, if you have it on the bottom, you can still tuck the cables into this channel as well. So it's completely up to you how you want to position those receivers. All right, the next fan that I'm going to tackle are going to be our bottom fans. You definitely want to get yourself reverse blades, so that way you're bringing in cold air from the bottom into the case. Now I'm also going to go for the LCD version. That way I can still look at the screen right on the bottom. I think it'll look cool, but you can go for the non-LCD version. All right, and starting with the bottom right portion of this case, this time we want to remove the tabs from the front as well as all the ones on the back. Next thing you want to do is attach your receiver on the fan. Now I already repositioned the cable so that I can go to this direction, and then you can start passing the ends of these cables right on the bottom channel and go ahead and pull it through. And on this case, inside the Corsair box, they're actually going to give you these long case fan screws, and they're meant to screw in the bottom fans. So you get a total of 12 screws, and we're going to be using 4 for the bottom right, of course. And you want to just find the openings for the 120mm, which is going to be on the top right. The outer holes are for a 140mm fan. Go ahead and find the hole, and you can start screwing them in. All right, now that we have that screwed in, the beauty of the TL wireless fans is that we can reattach these tabs right on top so we can hide those screws, making it look nice and clean. All right, and by the way, when installing this fan, just make sure you have the RGB infinity mirrors obviously on this side. I kind of didn't realize that I didn't have that in the correct orientation. So I just ended up realizing a little bit too late when I was editing some of the video footage. All right, we have our bottom right in. Now we can tackle our bottom left. So this supports 2 additional 120mm fans. It's very important to know that attaching fans on top is only compatible as long as you have your GPU horizontally mounted. You're not going to be able to mount fans on the bottom if you decide to attach a vertical GPU mount instead. So make sure you're going to go for the horizontal method, which we are going to be doing in this video. So since we have 2, we want to make sure we, of course, daisy chain our TL fans and interlock them. And then we're going to remove the tabs on the top and on the back as well. All right, next thing we're going to attach is our receiver. Of course, on the male end, push it in, slide it to the left. Thankfully, the default position is perfect. We want the cable shooting this way. And go ahead and grab the ends of these cables, and you want to feed them on the bottom left channel. Go ahead and start pulling it through, and we can start positioning these fans right on top. And one thing to note, when you have these fans positioned, it's going to make it very difficult to connect any additional connections on the bottom of the motherboard, such as a USB or fan PWM connectors. And so with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and just screw in top left and bottom right corner of the set of fans. So that way I can easily remove them, so I can show you exactly where all the connections go. And so this does take the long fan screws that are found in the Corsair box. So go ahead and find the hole. All right, so I'm not gonna screw it all the way in. So I just screwed in each of the corners here. Having those 2 screws makes it so that it is attached to the case, so that way you can see how everything is looking. All right, the next fan that we're going to tackle is going to be our rear fan, which attaches right over here. And so this supports one 120mm fan. Now, this time we're going to go for a standard blade or a normal blade. And these are meant to exhaust hot air out, since the direction of airflow is going this way. I'm also going to be going for the LCD, since you'll definitely be able to see the LCDs on the rear position, and for the top are the only ones that I'm going to use non-LCD. Now, next thing here is we're going to flip it over, of course, remove these tabs. Just the ones on the back. Go ahead and grab your wireless receiver and attach it to the male end. The default position of the cables is perfect. So on the other end, we're going to pass it right in this tiny opening right over here, just above the CPU power connectors. You could also pass this through this top channel as well, whichever one you want to go for, but I'm going to go for just above the CPU power connector. So I'm going to pull that all the way through. Okay, I'm going to lay this fan right here for now. And then we're going to go ahead and grab 4 case fan screws and go ahead and position it. You have multiple positions. You can go all the way up, you can go all the way down. Keep in mind that we have the receiver on top, and depending on the AIO and the fan, it may come into close contact with the receiver. So for now, I'm just going to center it. I'm not going to go for the top position, and you can always move it later on. But in my experience with these receivers, sometimes when I put it in the top position, it ends up colliding And I'm gonna go ahead and rotate the case so I can show you exactly what's going on. And as you can see, we have our mounting screws with different positions, so you can go all the way up or all the way down. And so it's gonna take a total of 4 screws. All right, all 4 screws are screwed in, and we can take a look at how that looks. Right in the front here, now we have our rear fan. We can go ahead and start tucking the top portion of the cable. There's like a little hook on the corner of the case. You can kind of like position the cable inside that hook and pull the remaining cable as far as possible. This hook can be nice and tight and as clean as possible. Now that we have our side fans installed, bottom right, bottom left, and our rear fan, let's go ahead and connect these while we have the space. So I'm going to rotate our case, and then you should see a total of 4 cables that are coming from your fans. If you have the LCD versions, you're going to notice 2 connectors on each one of them. One is a PWM and a 9-pin USB connection. If you have a non-LCD version, then you're only going to see this connector. And so the next thing I want to do here is utilize this SATA power connector. And based off of Lian Li's instructions, you can actually just connect this to the PWM headers of your motherboard. However, sometimes depending on the header, it may not supply enough power for multiple daisy chain fans. So if you have like 2 or 3 fans daisy chained, it might not be enough. And so for our triple fans, our dual fans on the bottom, and eventually our triple fans on the top of the AIO, we're going to connect those using this SATA to 2-pin connectors, which again is included when you have at least 1 3-pack. You could, if you wanted to, go for 2 3-packs and get 2 of these and use each one of these ends and connect these into it as well. Another option you do have is getting yourself a PWM hub. You can probably slap it over here and connect them that way. Any fan that I have that's more than 1, I'm just going to, again, connect it to here. So starting off with our side fans, we're going to pull this cable and we're going to locate this 4-pin PWM, and you'll notice that it really only takes 2 pins. So this is just for power. We're going to take our SATA connector and we're going to connect that right in, matching up the tabs. Okay, so now our side fan is connected. For now, we're going to ignore the USB connectors momentarily. I'm going to connect that right after. The next set of fans are going to be our top bottom fans, and that's going to be this right here. So we're going to grab this, locate that PWM end, and we're going to connect it with one of these. Connect the tabs together, and that's it. Now we currently just have our side fan and our bottom top fans connected to this, and so we have 1 remaining that I'm going to save for the fans that are going to go on the AIO. For the remaining ones, which is going to be your rear fan, your bottom single fan, we're going to connect the PWM into our motherboard. Since it's just 1 fan and your motherboard, it should be more than enough to supply power. Following the direction of this cable, it'll be very easy to just feed this connector straight into this channel where we fed the bottom front panel connector. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. And same thing with our single bottom fan. I'm going to feed it probably to the same direction because our PWMs are on the bottom of the motherboard. All right, now we're going to rotate the case. You know, those connectors should be on the bottom, but like I said earlier, these bottom fans make it harder for us to see. You could wiggle yourself through, but just go ahead and remove the corner screw that you just installed. So that way we can momentarily move the fans. So with that out of the way, I can push this out of the way. I can just leave it on top. I want to bring you guys a little bit closer. So we should have both of these connectors that we just passed through. And you want to locate your 4-pin PWM headers on your motherboard. And they basically look just like this. You can reference your motherboard's layout, but they basically have 4 pins with a tab on the bottom. So most motherboards have several located on the bottom of the motherboard. In this case, this motherboard has 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I can connect these anywhere. And so since I position my cables more on this side, I'm just going to start with the bottom left. So this cable is for our rear fan, and we're just going to match this tab with the tab on the bottom. So it only goes one way, and go ahead and push it in. So now we have our rear fan connected directly to the motherboard. And then the final one here, I'm going to connect that right over here. This is another 4-pin header or fan header, chassis fan. Push that in, and now we have both of these two connected directly to the motherboard. All right, while I have these bottom fans out of the way, now will be the perfect time to connect any of your USB connections. And because we have LCD fans, each of these LCD fans utilizes a USB header. So we actually have 4 sets of LCD fans that are daisy chained. So we're going to need 4 USB headers. This is where utilizing a powered USB hub comes in very handy, because most motherboards only come with 2 USB headers. This motherboard actually comes with 3 headers, so more than standard motherboards. However, we're still going to need more than that. So this one is by height. This is a USB powered hub. You can go with any one of these, but this gives you 4 additional USB headers, which is going to be very easy to connect each of these USBs directly to this USB hub. Another thing to note here is that if your AIO has an LCD screen, that's also going to be using a USB header. So because I have 4 sets of LCD screens, we're actually going to use up all 4 of these, but thankfully I have an additional 2 just in case. Most motherboards will have that additional 1, so you don't need to have 2 separate USB hubs. And if you happen to have those Lian Li Edge PSUs that come with an integrated USB hub, then you don't need a separate hub. And so the height powered USB utilizes this cable, and this is the connector that we need to connect straight to the motherboard, which is labeled USB 2.0. And so on your motherboard, you're going to locate your USB headers, which are normally on the bottom of your motherboard. And these USB headers have a total of 9 open pins with 1 missing. And we just have to match up that missing pin when we're connecting our USB. Connect that real quick. Now that I have that connected, I'm going to pass the other ends into this open channel over here. We're going to pass that right through. And then we can just place our bottom fans back in. We may need to remove these fans again if we need additional USBs. And so for this case, I'm just going to screw in 2 screws because I know I'm going to remove this again. All right, now that we have our bottom fans temporarily screwed again, we're going to flip our case on the opposite side. And now we're going to attach our USB hub directly on the case. Thankfully, this height USB hub has magnets on the other side, so they literally magnetically stick to any metal portion of the case. So I can position it really anywhere. But before we do that, we're going to grab each USB that are attached to each of these LCD fans. Remember, this is only for LCD fans. So we're going to grab our hub and we're going to locate the missing pin, make sure that matches up, and we're going to start connecting it. And so this is for the rear fan. Next we have our side fan. Then we have our bottom top fans. And then our single bottom fan. We're going to connect that right over here as well. So now all of our fans, all of our LCD fans are all connected to this hub. And the final thing to connect is going to be that connector that we just connected to the motherboard. And so on one end we have a USB-C, which connects right over there. This is what's going to communicate to the actual motherboard. And the final connector is just a SATA power connector, which will connect when we install the PSU cables. So for now, I'm going to attach this powered hub right on the center. And then towards the end, when we start to cable manage, we can maybe find a better position, or this might be the best position. It all depends. And so really the only 2 connectors that we haven't connected yet are these 2 SATA powers, one for the daisy chain fan and one for a powered hub. And finally, this last one, which I'm going to reserve for our top 3 fans. So for now, we're going to dump these cables inside. All right, so now that we have most of our fans connected, normally I would like to install the AIO in this step. However, since there's not a lot of space between the top of the motherboard and the top of the case, if I install the AIO with the fans, it might make installing the CPU power connectors very difficult. So because of that, I think now would be the perfect time to start installing our power supply unit alongside all of the cables that we're going to be using to connect directly to the motherboard. Now, the PSU that I'm going for is going to be the ROG STRIX 1200 watt platinum rated PSU. So before installing our PSU, let's go ahead and cover all of our PSU cables. Now, when it comes to your power supply units, you want to locate the area where all of our connectors are. Most modern PSUs nowadays are all modular, so they're very easy to connect. So the first connectors I want to go over is going to be our CPU power connectors. And you can easily identify this by locating the cable that specifically says CPU. And your power supply unit should have 2 sets of these cables. Now the motherboard that we're using actually calls for 2 8-pin connectors, but your motherboard may only use a total of 8, or you can also convert these 8 pins into just 4 by just separating them. On this particular connector, this one has like an additional tab over here that you do have to press to be able to separate it, but most of them have a very easy separation. So since our motherboard calls for 2 8-pin connectors, this one labeled CPU is going to go directly to the motherboard, while the other end is going to go exactly directly to the PSU. So just go ahead and grab your PSU, and you want to locate where it says CPU/PCIe. They're going to be all of these connectors here. That means I can place my CPU power connector in any one of these connectors, and it can also be mixed in with PCIe as well. So all we have to do is just mash the tab right up. We're going to put it right in the middle, and then you just click that right through. And so that's our first one, and then our second one. The next major power connector that you're going to need is going to be your 24-pin ATX power connector, and this powers your motherboard, and it's very easy to identify because it is the largest connector. And that's going to go directly to where it says NB, which stands for motherboard, and we have those 2 separate connectors there. So all we have to do is just match each one. We have one connector here and the other one right over here. And so now our motherboard power connectors are installed. Next set of cables I want to cover are your PCIe connectors. Now you would use these for graphics cards that don't use the new 12-volt high power connectors like the 40 series or 50 series. And so if you have a graphics card that calls for PCIe, of course you want to locate the side that says PSU, and you can connect that into any one of these that says CPU/PCIe. However, since we're going to go for the RTX 5080, we actually don't need to use any of these PCIe connectors, but if you do, you get a set of 4. All right, and here is the infamous 12-volt high power connector here. Now, these are specifically for NVIDIA GPUs that utilizes this special connectors, since this provides up to 600 watts of power delivery with just this one single cable. Now, the ROG STRIX PSU takes it a step further by giving us 2 extra pins, which goes directly in this colored tab right over here. And this one provides what ROG calls their intelligent voltage stabilizer. So this is something that you're going to see if you have a very special PSU. And that's one of the reasons why this particular PSU commands a more premium price. So on this end, we have PSU, and on the other end, it says 600 watts. So this is the one that we're going to connect to the actual power supply unit. And so you want to locate where it says 12 volt 2x6. And so that connects right over there. You just line up, you have that 4 extra pins right on top of there, and we're going to connect that right in. Make sure it's clicked in all the way through. And because we have the ROG STRIX Platinum PSU, we're going to put these 2 additional pins right over there. And once again, you only need to use this particular cable if your graphics card utilizes the 12-volt high power connector. The next set of cables are going to be your SATA power connectors. Now your PSU might give you a set of 2, 3, sometimes even 4, and even different types of configurations. So this one, for example, is all straight, while some of them might give you more of an angle approach. You can decide to use either one of these, but if you guys recall earlier, we do have some SATA power connectors that we do have to connect that powers our USB powered hub and also the additional fan power. So we're going to be using one of these, and the end that gets connected to the PSU has 6 pins. And on your PSU, you're going to locate where it says peripheral/SATA/Molex. So you can connect it to any one of these 6 pins. So I'm going to put it all the way on the top left, right over there. The final set of cables that you're going to see on your PSU are going to be your Molex connectors. Now, these are very old style connections that I personally have yet to see any devices that actually use this, but it is included just in case, but we're not going to be using this at all. All right, and now we're ready to install the PSU on our case. And so our PSU gets installed right over here. There is an opening here to access your PSU on this side over here. And the reason why we connected all these cables now is because once the PSU is inside here, it makes it very difficult to connect things from the side. So first things first, we want to make sure we remove all the cables that are on the bottom. Just go ahead and just move them to the side so that way you get as much space as possible. You're going to grab your PSU here. You're going to locate wherever the fan is, and you want to make sure that this fan is positioned on the bottom, because this is going to be intaking air from the bottom of the case. You don't want to put the PSU like this with the fan facing upwards, because there's no cold air to intake from. So make sure you position the fan on the bottom just like this. So sometimes your PSU might look like it's upside down, which in this case it's upside down. And so all we have to do now is you're gonna notice some rubber feet. Sorry, not rubber, it's like a foam piece. And that's where you're gonna place the PSU right on top. So go ahead and start sliding it in. All right, I'm going to start pushing these cables more over here, and we can start rotating our case. And inside your PSU box, you're gonna locate your PSU screws, which look just like this. And we're gonna need a total of 4. Reposition your PSU. You'll see the mounted screws for your PSU. So go ahead and just wiggle it through. I wanna make sure that the screws are being exposed. So there's one right over here, here, and here. Remember, every PSU has mounting holes in different locations. That's why they have multiple different holes to accommodate every single PSU combination. Once you're ready, go ahead and start screwing it in. All right, now I have all 4 screws screwed in on each of these corners here. And now we can proceed. Let's go ahead and rotate the case again. All right, now you're ready to install our CPU power connector here. And you want to, of course, locate the ones that say CPU. And these CPU power connectors are going to be connected right over here. So we're going to pass the CPU power connectors right in this channel right over here. We'll start tucking these cables more towards the side of the case. All right, we're going to momentarily leave this like this. The next connector I want to tackle is going to be our ATX power cable, which powers the motherboard here. And depending on whether or not you're going to be using any type of extension cables like I am, I'll be using the Lian Li Wireless Strimer RGB cables. This will basically get connected like this. If you're not going to be using any type of extension cables, then you can simply pass this ATX power on this upper middle channel, which is right over here, because this is where your ATX will be powered. However, since I'm going to be using the Lian Li wireless Strimer, I'm going to connect this portion on the bottom of the Strimer, so it just gets connected just like this. Go ahead and push that through. And to make things really tidy, I'm going to try my best to kind of go underneath. I'm going to pass that in this upper middle channel here. Just like this. I think now I can put this here. And because I'm using extension cables, you'll do end up with excess cables, so it's a little bit harder to cable manage. So for now, I'm going to leave this like this momentarily. Since we're still in the back here, let's go ahead and connect our SATA power connectors that we currently have. Starting off with the SATA power connector that powers our height powered USB hub, we're going to connect that on one end. It only goes one way, so it just connects just like this. Just push it through. And then the next SATA power connector is going to be the one powering the daisy chain fan, so any fans that's more than one. And we're going to also connect that as well. And so now we're left with one SATA power connector, which I'm actually going to end up using for the AIO that I'm going to be using. So we have one extra SATA power connector just in case. And so the only power connector that we haven't connected so far is going to be this 12-volt high power cable. So for now, we can start tucking these cables inside of the case and this opening over here, start pushing things through, and we'll reference this later and also cable manage as well. But for now, I want to tuck all these in for now. And then let's go ahead and rotate the case. And so the only cable connector we should be seeing now is going to be our CPU power connectors and our motherboard power connector. So starting off with the CPU, that's going to be connected on the top left of your motherboard here. So all we have to do is locate these tabs and make sure the tabs are facing upward like this, and you just literally just connect it right in. That's one. And then for our final one, go ahead and push that in. All right, so now both of these are installed, so we can start pulling the cable from the opposite side to make it a little bit cleaner, of course. And then finally, our 24-pin ATX power connector, which is this cable right over here. And that's going to get connected right over here on the right side of the motherboard. When I bend it, I want to make sure this tab is facing the right side, so I can just literally just bend. Now, just a little FYI, I'm having a little bit struggle because the USB-C is very close to the connector here, and the Strimer is a little bit thicker. You're not going to have this issue if you're not using Strimer, so go ahead and unplug your USB-C momentarily. Connect your Strimer wireless, your wireless Strimer cable. That locks in, and then you can kind of wiggle your way in to connect the USB-C connector again. Make sure that's pushed through. So now we can start tucking the Strimer cable inward. So now we have our CPU power connected and our motherboard power connected as well. Let's go ahead and rotate the case again. We're left with a lot of chaos, as you can see. And so if you want to, you can take some time to reposition your cables here. I'm also going to utilize this bracket right over here, and I'm going to also unplug this again. And I'm actually going to pass this ATX power connector right underneath if it allows me to. I'm able to do this in the middle, just so I can have things cleaned up, because when you're using extension cables, you have so much excess cables that it makes it a little bit harder to make things cleaner. And so that way it looks much better. All right, so let's put this momentarily here, and we're just going to tuck all these cables inwards, and we'll tackle these later on and do any type of cable management. But for now, I want to just leave things the way they are, and we can go ahead and move on to our next step. All right, the next step we're going to do is install our AIO. Now on the 3500X, there is no removable bracket, so we are going to have to install the AIO directly onto the case. And so the AIO that I'm going to be going for is going to be the NZXT Kraken Elite 360. So let's go ahead and set this up. All right, now we're ready to set up our AIO, and once again, I'm going for the NZXT Kraken Elite 360. Now, if you're going to go for the black color option, you'll have two options. You'll have an RGB version and a non-RGB version, which is this one right here. For those that are looking into white, they only come in RGB. So for those of you guys that are gonna go for the black one, I recommend the non-RGB, because we're gonna be replacing these fans anyways. Now, whichever AIO you end up going for, there's a really high chance that they're gonna come with their own set of fans, sometimes pre-installed. So if you're gonna be swapping them out for the Lian Li fans, I'm gonna be using the non-LCD versions on the AIO itself. And so I recommend getting a 3-pack if you can, or you can get them individually. So let's go ahead and open this up. And thankfully, on this NZXT AIO, the fans are not pre-installed. So really, all we really need is the radiator itself, which is this whole piece here. Okay, I'm gonna place that right on top of there. You also want to grab, of course, the breaker cable as well. Let's leave that to the side. And for reference, all the fans are here. They are separated. There's a great chance that your AIO will also come with 2 separate kits, one for AMD and one for Intel. Since we're going for the 9800 XGD, we're going to go for the AMD kit. And finally, make sure you grab the other mounting accessories as well and leave that to the side. All right, so let's go ahead and grab the radiator itself. We're going to move this pump out of the way. And all of our fans are basically going to go right on top of here. Now, if your AIO has fans already pre-installed, then go ahead and unscrew them and remove all of them out, so that way we can replace it with these TR wireless fans. And so of course we want to make sure we daisy chain these fans first. All right, now we have all 3 fans daisy chained. And next thing we want to do is we want to remove the tabs on the top as well as the ones on the back. So make sure to remove all of these corner pieces. All right, so I finally removed the corner pieces on each side. And of course we want to make sure that these fans are facing this way. These are standard blade. These are not reverse blade, so make sure you get the normal blade fans, of course, because these are going to be exhausting the hot air outside of the case. Now, the next thing to point out is the male end connector for the receiver. Keep in mind that this AIO has the connectors right on the right side of it. And so if I put the male end on this side, I won't be able to install the receiver. So we have no choice but to make sure that the male end of this is located on this side. And to make sure that you have it correctly, let's go ahead and attach this first. All right, so that way when we have the receiver installed, we will automatically know if I try to put it here, we're not going to be able to match up the screw holes. So of course we have no other choice but to, of course, have it just like this, where we can line up all the screw holes. Next thing here is you want to grab your other mounting accessories and locate your radiator screws. And so every AIO should come with radiator screws. They're very long screws. If the fans are pre-installed, then of course you're just going to reuse those same screws. And also, depending on your AIO, some of the radiator screws come just like the screw itself. Some of them come with a washer that you get to install just like this. Or sometimes the radiator screws have like that washer already integrated in it. Now, one key thing that I do recommend, specifically for the newer Lian Li fans with these corner tab pieces, I recommend not installing this washer. Only because in order for these corner tab pieces to be flush, when I install this without the washer, the screw goes all the way in so I can lock it in place. Whereas if I add the washer and I try to screw that in, the washer prevents the screw from going all the way in. So sometimes when you try to apply that corner tab piece, it's not going to sit flush, and a lot of times it ends up falling out of place. So in the scenario of this particular type of fan, just install it without the washer. If you're using other type of fans, then go ahead and install it with the washer, but I'm going to do it without it. So all we have to do now, of course, is pass the screw through and make sure we align the screw holes and screw all of them right in. All right, I got all 12 screws screwed in, and next thing here is we want to cover up those corner tab pieces. So go ahead and take your time and cover the top. All right, and all corner tab pieces are in. It makes it look so much cleaner. And next up here is to install any additional cables that you need. In this case, for the Kraken Elite, we have this breaker cable that gets attached to the right side, which is this right over here. A lot of AIOs that don't have that breaker cable will have cables sticking out over here if you have an LCD screen, for example. But one of the reasons why I like the Kraken Elite is because they shift all those connectors to the actual radiator, making the actual pump very clean. So we're gonna install this breaker cable right over here. It just goes only one way. Make sure to snap that right in. And with that being said, we're now ready to install this. All right, and actually before we install it, one thing I forgot to mention is the orientation of this cable. But we do have to move it on the opposite side because as we're installing it like this, we want to make sure that cable is facing the other direction. So thankfully it's very easy, like I showed you multiple times. Just remove this top cover, pull the cable out, change that position, lock your cable back in, and then we can close it back up. All right, that way we have the cable in the proper direction. Last but not least, locate your short screws. These are the screws that we're going to be used to screw in our AIO on the case. So make sure you have that ready. And now we're ready to position this on our case. All right, before we start positioning our AIO, one thing I do recommend is grab at least 2 of your radiator screws and leave them right on top of the case here, as well as your screwdriver here, just to make things very easy, so that way you're nice and prepared. Since this doesn't have a removable bracket, we're going to have to hold the AIO at the same time. So once you're ready, grab your AIO, of course. We want to make sure that the pump is on this side over here. Unless if you want the pump that way, you're more than welcome to readjust. But personally for me, I like having the tubes on the right side as a personal preference. You're going to grab the other ends of the wireless receiver on the TL wireless. And we want to first feed that right over here, just right on top of the CPU power connectors where we pass through the other receiver for the rear fan. So I'm gonna quickly pass that through real quick. I'm gonna reach on the other side. I'm gonna try to pull that through. Just pull it enough so that way you can kind of guide it. It's a little difficult, of course, because you have your one hand busy holding the AIO, so it could be helpful having someone else assist you. But once you're ready, go ahead and slowly start positioning the AIO. I would recommend grabbing this pump. Thankfully, we have the clear plastic protecting the thermal paste, so if you want, you can go ahead and just position it right on top very carefully. So that way that doesn't fly as you're installing this, and then slowly just start pressing it against this top rail. Now, when you're looking at it from the top rail, and don't worry, I'm going to show you exactly how it looks like on top, you want to basically screw in at least one screw in the opposite corner just so that it can hold up. And so this is why I said have a screwdriver ready, so that way you can easily screw it in. So I'm just going to screw it in just right about there, and I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like. But as long as you put 2 screws opposite of each other, it helps having a screwdriver that has a magnetic tip. So as long as you have at least 2 screws on the opposite corner, you should be able to just let it go momentarily, and I'm going to meet you guys up there. All right, so here's a bird's view of exactly how it looks like when you're looking at it from the top, of course. And so since we're using a 360mm AIO, you want to focus your screw threads on this side, and you're going to have open screw threads on this side of the rail. I personally like to position the AIO as centered as possible. And like I said earlier, as long as you have those opposite screws, you can let go of the AIO momentarily, so that way you can then finish installing all of the screws. And so that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. All right, and I'm working on the final screw. Now you don't have to screw in every single radiator screw. Just as long as you have the majority of the screws, maybe at least 8 to 10, you're perfectly fine. It really depends on the positioning of the screw holes of your AIO. Sometimes a screw thread might be blocked depending on whatever position that you prefer. So not every single screw is necessary, so don't worry. All right, so next thing here on this Kraken Elite, this is the breaker cable that we installed earlier. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass this cable into the corner channel over here to make things as clean as possible. So you can literally go right on top. I'm going to pull the cable from the opposite side. And I'm going to try to reposition the breaker cable just so I can have it out of the way as much as possible. So, all right, and that's something that's very unique, of course, to the Kraken Elite with its breaker cable on this side. If your AIO has all of those connectors on the actual pump itself, you still have space. It's really hard to tell, but you still have space to run the wires in. So don't worry about that at all. For now, we're going to lay the case flat down so that way we can start installing the pump. My recommendation is put the pump as close to the back of the case. So that way, when we're laying our case flat down, it's not going to fly and hit something on the case. All right, and now we're ready to install our pump directly on top of our 9800X 3D. Now, before we do that, I recommend referencing the user manual of whatever AIO that you're particularly using, because every AIO may have completely different types of instructions. However, most AIOs have their own unique bracket system or standoffs. In this case, the NZXT Kraken does have its own unique standoffs. So make sure you grab your AMD kit or Intel kit if you have an Intel CPU. And on the AMD side, we have a specific retention bracket that we install on the actual pump, which we'll do soon. And these are the standoffs that we're going to use for our AMD CPU. All right, so for now, we're going to lay this flat on the motherboard. Just be very careful, of course. And next, we have to remove these original pieces. And so you're going to grab a Phillips screwdriver and go ahead and unscrew those 4 screws. All right, now that we have those 4 screws removed, once again, depending on your AIO, you may need to reuse the screws. In the case of the Kraken Elite, they have their own standoffs. So now I can remove these 2 original pieces out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and grab my standoff. I'm going to use the thicker side, not the thinner side, but the thicker side. And I'm going to screw that right on the screw hole points. All right, so now all 4 standoffs are screwed in. Next step here is grabbing the pump. And because we have specific AMD bracket to be installed on the actual pump, let's go ahead and remove this cover. Be very careful since we have that pre-applied thermal paste. You don't want to touch that at all. And the bracket that it currently has supports Intel, so we do have to remove it. So go ahead and just push it in that direction right there. Pay attention to the smoothness of this, because this one has a flat side and it has a smooth side. So when we're installing our other one, we want to install the smooth side. I'm going to remove the bottom piece here. All right, now it's time to install the AMD side. And once again, we're going to install on the smooth side, not the other side, because this one has more of flat. So the smoothness, and we're going to slide that right back in the same way that it was removed. All right. Again, this is for the AMD processor. Now we're ready to attach our pump directly on our CPU. Now, before I install this, if for whatever reason your AIO does not come with pre-installed thermal paste, or maybe you're reusing an AIO, make sure you apply thermal paste not on here, but on top of the actual CPU first, and then you can proceed installing the cover. Since we have our pre-installed thermal paste, it makes it very easy and convenient. So I'm going to go ahead and start positioning right over the standoffs that we just installed, and I'm just going to lay it right there. Next up, you're going to locate your thumb screws here. Again, every AIO is different, but we're going to screw in all 4 of these in. All right, now we have the pump successfully installed on top of our CPU. The next step here is to connect our AIO pump header as well as our USB connection if your AIO pump has an LCD screen like the Kraken Elite. Now, most AIOs might have the connections directly on the pump itself. So you'll have the cables kind of like on the top or on the bottom where you can easily just connect it from there. But because all the connections on the Kraken Elite are leading from this breaker cable on the right side, those cables are currently behind the case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my case and I'm going to show you guys exactly how to route that cable real quick. All right, specifically for the NZXT Kraken Elite, this is the breaker cable that we passed through originally. For other AIOs that have the connection directly on the pump, you're more than welcome to skip this step and I'll show you exactly how to connect everything else. But specifically on the Kraken Elite, all the connectors are located on the back. And so starting off with our AIO pump header, which is these 3 pins here, we're going to pass that right on top of here in this little channel opening here. So I'm just going to pull that through. This connector on the Kraken Elite is specifically to attach the original fans that came with the Kraken. So this connector we can completely ignore. This cable is going to be our USB connection that connects to the LCD screen of our pump. If you have additional space on your powered USB hub, you can connect it directly to this USB hub. In this case, since this is all used up, I'm going to go ahead and pass it underneath because we have additional USB headers on the bottom of the motherboard. So I'm going to pass this cable behind some of these cables. And the USB on this motherboard is usually on the middle, so I'm just gonna pass it right over here. There's some space between the PSU. It might be a little bit difficult. So on the other side, I'm able to just grab the USB, and I'm just gonna pull that through, and we'll connect that right after. All right, and finally, we have our SATA power connector. Not every AIO is gonna have SATA power, but the Kraken Elite does. And so, like I showed you earlier, we did have one SATA power available. So I'm just gonna pull this out momentarily to locate that, and that's right over here. This is our one last SATA power that we have. So I'm just gonna go ahead and connect that real quick. And again, this is gonna be used for extra power to the Kraken Elite. But let me pass this cable on behind, just to tidy things up a little bit. I'm just gonna connect that right in, just like this. Perfect. So that's a SATA power connector. Finally, for the top fans that are attached to our AIO, we have this connector right over here. And again, this is for the top 3 fans. And like I said earlier, with our 3-way splitter that I showed you earlier that connects these fans, this is the last one that we're going to connect. And so I'm going to connect that right in. So now our top fans have power directly to SATA. And now we're just going to retuck these cables in momentarily. And we're going to rotate the case. All right, and the AIO pump header that we just passed through is going to be this cable right here. It may have 3 pinholes or 4 pinholes. Now, where you want to connect this directly to your motherboard is usually on the top right. You'll have a couple of little connectors here. Reference your motherboard's layout once again. Sometimes your motherboard will have letters letting you know which one's which. But you want to connect this to an AIO pump header if your motherboard has one. If your motherboard does not have an AIO pump header, you can simply just connect this directly to CPU fan, or you can connect it to CPU optional. I personally like to do CPU fan. But this motherboard has a dedicated AIO pump header, which on this motherboard, we have a total of 4 headers here. Starting from the left, this is CPU fan. Next up, we have CPU optional. The third one is the AIO pump header. And the final one is a chassis fan, so you can install more additional fans. So the AIO pump header, of course, we're going to put that where it says AIO pump header. So that's going to be on the 3rd slot. Again, every motherboard might have it in different locations, so reference your motherboard. I'm going to pull this cable as much as I can. And let's tidy this up a little bit more. And next up we have is our USB, which is poking up right here. And if you guys remembered earlier, I only screwed in the corners because I knew we'll have one extra USB that I had to connect. Just so I can show you as easy as possible. You could kind of wiggle your way in, but it's just easier if you temporarily remove the fan out of the way so you have a lot of space. And you're going to connect the USB that connects this LCD screen to an open USB header on your motherboard. In this case, I have 2 extra ones. On most motherboards, if you're using that powered hub, you should have an additional USB just in case. And once again, we have 9 pins with 1 missing. Make sure you match up that missing pin. It's very crucial that you align these perfectly, because if these pins are not installed correctly, things might not work. So just highly recommend you double check your pins. Plug that right in. All right, so now our USB is connected. And now we can start installing these fans. But this time, I'm no longer going to just screw in the corner screws. I'm going to screw in all 8 screws. All right, and now that all those screws are finally in, now I'm going to attach these corner pieces, since there's no need for me to remove these fans anymore, unless if I wanted to add an additional USB for the wireless controller. All right, perfect. We have all of our corner tab pieces. All right, guys, now that we have the TL wireless all screwed into the case and also connected as well, what makes these fans wireless is the fact that they all connect to this one wireless controller, which all of the receivers that we attached on the actual fans will basically connect wirelessly through this central controller. So we no longer need to have a specific hub just for the TR wireless, because another great thing about this wireless controller is that it's also compatible with the other wireless ecosystem, which is why I'm able to also use the Wireless Strimer, which all connect to the same wireless controller. So no need for additional hubs. So that's the reason why it is considered a wireless solution. Now, there's two ways you can install this in your case. One way is by utilizing this cable that gets attached right over here and splits off into a 4-pin PWM and a USB connector. So you could connect this wireless controller and leave it inside the case and connect this to an open USB. But as you guys saw earlier, we have used up a lot of USBs, and I technically have one additional USB here that I can simply just connect. However, if for whatever reason you're following my same exact build and your motherboard does not have any available USBs without the need of using another USB hub or any type of splitters, the awesome thing about the wireless controller is that you also have the option of plugging it via USB right on the back of the motherboard. Any one of these open USB-A slots, just like this, and you're pretty much golden. All right, so now we're almost at the finish line, and the next major component that we're going to install is going to be our graphics card, which is probably going to be the most exciting. And so the GPU that I'm going to go for is going to be the ROG Astral 5080, which is a beautiful black graphics card. I mean, this thing is beautiful. It even has like an additional fan on top, making it 4 fans. So definitely a beautiful GPU. I'm going to leave this right over here for a quick second. In order to install your GPU on this case, right on the left side, you're going to notice these slot covers. There's a total of 7 slot covers with screws holding each one. Depending on the size of your GPU, you may only need to remove 2 slot covers, 3, or maybe even 4. So I'm going to go ahead and remove 4 of these and hold on to these screws, because these are the same screws we're going to use to screw in the GPU. So without the screw, you can go ahead and pull this right out. That's 1 slot cover out, and repeat. And so now we're ready to install our graphics card. Now keep in mind that this is a very, very thick GPU and is also very heavy. Now the 3500X does not have a built-in anti-GPU sag integrated onto the case. So one thing I do recommend, if you're going to be using a very large GPU that's also heavy, like the ROG Astral, or even any GPU, it might be great to just have it just in case, is getting yourself an anti-GPU sag bracket like this. I personally like to have the pillar style ones. It's probably like a medium size, and it gives you the option to adjust the heights. And so I'm going to raise it up just a little bit here, and you can always readjust. And I'm going to place that right behind the corner of this fan right over here. So it's going to go right here. And it's magnetic, so you can literally stick it anywhere. I'm going to stick it right over here. And you should notice it right there. I'm still able to adjust it just in case. I'm going to keep it in this level. Now, let's go ahead and grab our GPU. You want to locate the notch, which is going to be this right here. And you're going to match that up with that notch right over there. And we're going to slowly position the GPU closer and closer to the express slot until you line up the notches and you come really close, and then you can just push it right in. Now once you push it in, if you slowly let go, the weight of the GPU is very heavy, and honestly these 2 fans are like super close. But really quickly, go ahead and grab your screw. I'm gonna move this here. When you pick up the GPU again, you should see the screws align, and go ahead and screw in at least the middle, and it should hold the weights of the GPU, because remember, we also have that pillar right here that's also holding on to the weight of this graphics card. So as you can see here now, it's leveled, which is great. I'm going to take the last screw here, and I'm also going to screw in this right over here. All right, now that we have both screwed in, you're going to notice that there is this huge opening here. So I actually miscalculated the positioning of the express slot here. No worries, if you come across that scenario, you can easily just position this slot cover and slide it back in, and then you can screw that in, so that way you don't have that gap. All right, now that I have the Astral 5080 completely installed, once again, it's sitting very, very close with these bottom fans, which might not be the most optimal. So whenever it comes to running these type of fans, I'll probably keep them at a very low RPM, because it is sitting really close. I would probably recommend also just removing these fans completely, especially when you have a GPU this thick. But we also have additional room right over here. So I'm really curious to see how the temperatures are going to behave even with these bottom fans. So it's going to be completely up to you whether or not you want to keep these fans if you happen to have such a really thick GPU. But for aesthetics and having those nice infinity mirrors, I still think it's going to look really nice. I probably wouldn't get the LCD versions, of course, because as you can see, you're not really going to be able to see them as much. I already got 2 3-packs, so no issues. I can just leave the LCD screens on these two completely off, so I don't have to worry about that at all. So the last thing here is plugging up the power right over here. And if you guys remembered, we have our 12-volt high power connector on the back of our case, which is this power connector. So if you wanted to, you can route it to the top, or you could also route it to the bottom of the case. However, I'm going to be using the Lian Li wireless strimmers. Now, whenever you get these wireless strimmers, by default, they come attached with this right angle adapter. But inside the box, they do give you the clip to convert it to a straight instead. They also have white clips as well. If for whatever reason you don't have the straight adapter clips, you can always contact Lian Li and they'll be able to send you these. But I've been seeing all the newer ones come with these clips, so I'm really happy that they started to include that. Since I'm using the extension cables, I'm going to take the other end and I'm going to plug that right in. We want to make sure that we plug it all the way in as tight as possible. The next thing here is deciding on how you want to position your strimmer cable. It's up to you how you want to position your strimmer cable. I personally like to run the strimmer from top to bottom so it can have that nice waterfall effect. And so I'm going to pass that right over this top channel. And I'm going to start to slowly pull it through. And then let's go ahead and rotate our case. All right, and here is our strimmer cable. I'm going to also continue to pull it through so we get as much of the cable. Now, one thing to note is that the clips are still attached. So I'm going to unclip these. These are the clips that might be stuck at the end. So go ahead and grab those 2 clips. So I'm going to pull it as much as I can. So this is as much as I can. And we have just enough space to connect our strimmer cable. And even if your connector is located here, you should have some space. If not, you might have to pull the cable even more just so you can actually reach it or change the position of the cable. And one final note, if for whatever reason, when you're connecting it, these top 4 pins don't line up with the 4 pins of your GPU, depending on which one you have, some GPUs have the 4 pin in the opposite direction. All you need to do is change the orientation of this cable by removing the clips on the top and the bottom and flip it so that way you have the correct orientation. So with that being said, let's go ahead and connect it through. Now it is coated in blue, so make sure again you connect it all the way through. And then I'm going to take the clear clips and I'm going to clip this right over here so that the RGB cable and the power cable are close to each other. All right, now that we have that connected, let's rotate that case one final time. All right, and this is basically what we are left with. A whole bunch of chaos. So it's going to be really up to you on how you want to manage all of this. You can just simply tuck all these cables in this chamber over here, pull all the cables to the corners and try to tidy everything up, because once you put the back cover, everything will stay into place. Or you can use these zip ties that come included in the Corsair accessory box. You can also find these zip ties included in your PSU as well. And you can also use this to manage the cables. You'll notice that around the case, you have a lot of these portion on the case that allow you to loop any type of cable tie, whether it be Velcro or this type of zip ties. For the CPU power connector, I can easily position this all the way to the corner and use this loop, for example. And I'll probably combine both the CPU and the GPU, kind of route it to the corner over there, and then you can take the time and manage it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now. All right, guys, and after taking a few minutes, I want to say I took probably like 10 minutes, but I added a couple of zip ties. Added one over here to hold this in place on top. Another one in the corner over here to hold both the GPU and the CPU connectors, following it down. And you could also tuck all these excess cables on the corner if you wanted to, but I still kind of wanted to see the PSU on the side, which I still think this looks really nice, even though it's upside down. So I was able to just tuck all of these cables inwards and basically route them. You might have to also unplug some of these so you can route it to whatever way that you wanted to route. So that's exactly what I did over here. I was able to just reroute some of these. Don't be afraid to use the channel here. You can fit certain cable in the back to give you the illusion that everything is nice and hidden. The only other zip tie that I used was one over here just to tidy this thing up over here. There's a lot more channels on the sides of the case as well. It's up to you if you want to use them. I didn't think that there was a need, only because all of these cables, especially the Lian Li streamers, kind of do a good job in holding these in place. So there's really no reason to go further. And a lot of these are just pushed inside. Like I said, it's going to be completely up to you. You don't have to do crazy cable management because the back cover is going to cover a lot of it, but it does help tidying everything up. And me personally, I'm perfectly satisfied with this. The final thing here before we put on the back cover is this powered USB hub has an on and off switch. So it has like a little dial right where the H is at for the height symbol. So when it's all the way on the left, it is off. And when you turn it all the way to the right, it is on. Whenever the case has power, this will light up with a white light that does illuminate the case. So that's how you know whether or not it's off or on. But make sure you position this in the on position. Unfortunately, there's not a really easy way to tell if it's on or off. But just make sure you switch it all the way to the right. You can feel it. So it's on the right and that's on. All right, and once you're done, go ahead and grab your back cover and line that up. And we're going to snap it in place. And as you can see, everything is now hidden. And now let's go ahead and put all the other glass panels on top. All right, next thing we're gonna grab is our top panel. You wanna make sure, of course, you line up all of the USB and power cutouts. And it's gonna go directly on top. Snap that in place. We got the top piece on. All right, next we're gonna work on our front glass. Now there is plastic on the inside as well as the outside of the glass, so make sure you peel all of that out. All right, and we're gonna position that right over here. Snap that in. All right, and before we attach our main side glass, let's go ahead and peel off any remaining plastic pieces. Make sure you do that, of course, before powering it on. And finally, the plastic on our Kraken Elite LCD screen. Perfect. Now we're finally ready to attach our main side glass panel. Let's remove the plastic on the inside. I'm gonna leave the one on the outside intact just momentarily. Just want to put this in first. All right, now we have that enclosed. And now let's finally peel this off. All right, and there we have it, guys. Our PC is fully built. And now I'm going to position it on the corner of the desk so we can power it on. All right, and before we power things on, I'm gonna go on the back of the case here and show you the things that you should connect. Starting from the top, this is the Lian Li L wireless controller, which you could also install inside the case as well. But for now, I have it via USB on the back of the motherboard. The next thing you also want to connect is a keyboard and mouse. And if this is your first time installing Windows on your SSD, make sure you have a USB drive that has the Windows 11 installation files, which you can download and set up on Microsoft's website. So that way you can install Windows 11 directly on your NVMe SSD. The next thing here is your input cables. I have a display port. You could also use HDMI. You want to obviously connect that to a monitor, and you obviously want to connect it directly to the GPU. Keep in mind that this input up here, that HDMI, connects to the integrated graphics card of your CPU, so make sure you connect it to your GPU instead. And last but not least, we have our AC power cord that connects directly to your PSU, and it is currently in the off position. So make sure you flip the switch on, which is going to put it on standby. Now we're ready to power on our PC. Now before I power it on, depending on which motherboard you have, you may have additional RGB lighting here. In this case, this ROG motherboard lights up when it's on standby. Some motherboards have that feature. If your motherboard doesn't, don't worry at all. Just make sure your PSU is set to the on position. And the power button on this case is located right on top, right over here. It's a big power button. And so we're gonna go ahead and power this on. And in 3, 2. All right, there we have power there. I'm gonna dim the lights here real quick. All right, so when you first power it on, you're gonna be greeted to this little message over here that a new CPU was installed. So all you have to do is press on the white button over here. So I'm gonna click on the white button here. Again, every motherboard is different. Some motherboards will boot directly into your Windows 11 Media Kit. Another thing to point out here is that all of your fans are going to default to this white color, which I think is absolutely beautiful because a lot of fans default to rainbow. Now, the only reason why you see the GPU Strimmer having an effect is because I'm reusing this GPU cable, so it automatically saved whatever the last preset was. Everything else is set to a rainbow color, which is perfectly fine. So next thing here, you're gonna have this little screen here letting you know what it detects. All we have to do is press F1, and so we're gonna go and hit F1, and it'll automatically take you to the BIOS settings. Now again, depending on your motherboard, it may automatically jump into your Windows bootable drive. Now if for whatever reason this USB is not detected like it just was earlier, I had it on the back of the motherboard, for some reason it did not detect. So you can go ahead and change the position of the flash drive instead of the back of the motherboard. Maybe try on top of the PC case and then power it on that way and see what happens. You may also have to clear the CMOS. There's a clear CMOS button on the back just to reset everything. It was able to detect that USB drive. I completely forgot to mention, but you're going to see this CPU fan speed lower limits. That's always going to pop up. So one thing I completely forgot to mention, since we don't have anything connected to the CPU fan header, we want to make sure we go on the bottom right where it says advanced mode, and then under monitor, we do fan speed monitor, CPU fan speed, which is right over here. We're going to click on this and we're going to hit this to ignore. And I'm going to go ahead and hit exit, save changes, and hit OK. And that screen shouldn't pop up anymore. And all we're waiting now is for that Windows 11 screen to finally show up. And there we have it, guys. It was about time. We now have the setup for the Windows 11. Again, want to go ahead and hit next again. And this is the option, of course. We want to make sure we do install Windows 11. I agree. Hit next. Here you have the option of adding your product key if you have one. You could also click on I don't have a product key and add one later on. You can purchase it directly to Microsoft or any other third party, whichever one you want to choose. In this case, I'm just going to put I don't have a product key, and I can always add that later on. Next thing here is going to ask you which one of these Windows 11 products you want. It really depends too on whatever product key you have. So if you want to use Windows 11 Home or Windows 11 Pro, that's completely up to you. You can hit accept. Next thing here is going to search for disks. It's going to search for every single USB drive or NVMe that's connected currently on our PC. And you're going to see here that there is currently two located. One that says unallocated space, and then another one saying disk 1 partition. And if you have several NVMe SSDs, you'll see different disks with different numbers. By default, disk 0 should always be the one that is on the primary NVMe slot. You can also tell because of the total size as well. You can see this one's 1.0 terabyte. So in this case, since we only have the USB drive, which is this one right here, and the NVMe drive, which is unallocated, all we have to do now is hit next. And so that's where we're going to install our Windows 11. And after that, we just hit install. And that's pretty much it. Everything else is self-explanatory. You basically just want to follow the prompts and you're pretty much good to go. All right, guys, once you have Windows 11 installed, you took your time to set up all your favorite apps and software, there are a couple of programs that you're going to need in order to make everything function the way you want. Starting off with the Lian Li Unifan wireless TL fans, you are going to need to download and install L-Connect 3 that you can get on Lian Li's website. Once you have everything installed, all you have to do is under the L-Connect 3, go to L Wireless Sync Setup and make sure you bind all of your wireless connections. And so you're going to notice all of these status with a blue chain. By default, it'll have like a broken chain. All you have to really do is click it and it'll assign a binding controller ID. And you can always click on this little icon over here to identify which is which. So for example, if I click on this, it's going to illuminate yellow, indicating that that's the rear fan. You also have the option of renaming each one of these to make it easier to identify whenever you're customizing it. So for example, I named that fan rear, bottom corner, top, bottom side, and you can name it however you want to. Now there is 7 active channels because like I said earlier, each L wireless receiver acts as one channel. So the rear is 1, the top 3 is 2, the side fans are 3, this one is 4, this one's 5, and of course the 2 streamers. And we still have the ability to add 3 extra wireless channels for whatever other wireless ecosystem that you might want to add. Once everything's binded, to fully control these fans, you go to Air Wireless Utility. And over here on this section is going to show all of the wireless devices that you currently have. I'm going to start off with the TL wireless fans first. So I'm just going to click on the rear fan real quick. And over here, you can customize all of the lighting settings, such as lighting effects, different type of color sets. You can set the brightness, and you can apply it individually on each section of fans, or you could also apply it to all of them. So for example, if I want to quickly make all these fans a color red, for example, I click on this little link to make all of them red. I hit apply, and you'll notice that this fan is now red. And if I want to quickly have everything synced up, I can click on apply to all, and now all the fans share that same color. In this drop down over here, you have all of your effects. There's so many different ones that you can go and explore, and you can also customize each side of the infinity mirror. So for example, if I choose this one and do white just to see, hit apply to all, and you're gonna notice that one side of these TL wireless fans change color. You can't really notice the rear or the bottom because it's white on the other side. And so the customizations are endless. So me personally, I'm going to leave everything to white for now. Now, if you have the LCD screens, you'll notice an animation playing right now. Whenever you want to customize that, right in the center, you can click on LCD screen. When you click on LCD screen, you can then have custom effects. I'm going to go ahead and click on the side fan here. And under side fan, I'm going to click on the LCD screen again. And right over here, we have the custom animation. Since we have 3 fans lined up, you do have the option to group them all together, or you can have them all individual. And over here, you have different options to choose from. You can upload your own pictures, MP4 files, animation. If it's for individual fan, let's say I click on the bottom real quick. Right now, I don't have anything set on this one because as you noticed earlier, you're not going to see the LCD screens anyways. Individually, for example, you can click on each fan. And there's a drop down, and again supports pictures, GIFs, MP4s. You can also add sensors, so you can put like your CPU temperature, and that's going to be individual. The next thing here, we have our streamer wireless cables. These are all of the lighting effects that you can customize, and you can have them both sync together. The next option here, to control the RPMs of your fans, you want to go to the fan/pump profile. In this section over here, as long as you have everything named, all of your fan are going to be shown here. You have the option for these fans to detect the temperature settings of your CPU, your GPU, or your water temperatures. By default, I personally just leave it to CPU. I like to keep things quiet, but you can literally customize the fan curves on each one. The only thing that I do want to cover is for these bottom fans over here, which are these two, because it is so close to the GPU, I made this curve detect the temperature of the GPU. And normally, GPU fans usually kick in around the 60 to 65 degree Celsius mark. Once the GPU senses that temperature is when the fan can start to slowly rev up. I don't want the fans to rev up high, because if these fans are revving up really high, it could also start to spin the GPU fans when it's not really meant to. Keep an eye on that. If you have this scenario where your GPUs is super close to the actual GPU, I recommend keeping those RPM as low as possible. You might need to tweak it here and there. And so using the software controls all of the fan and screen aspects of your PC. The next thing here is that if you have an LCD screen on your AIO, you want to download the respective software of whichever brand you chose. In this case, since we have the Kraken Elite, it'll be the NZXT Cam. And once you have NZXT Cam downloaded and installed and you update all the firmwares, you want to go to where it says lighting. And over here, you have full control of the LCD display as well as the RGB rings if you go for the Kraken with that RGB ring. Once I click on this, for example, I can literally select whatever I want on this drop down. So I can have a triple infographic. If I would just want to have a dual, for example, I click on dual. And it's very, very responsive. One of my favorite software experiences. So you can go ahead and upload your own GIFs. You can even browse GIFs as well. You can literally search for whichever one you want. And if you like something, you can go ahead and click on it and that'll upload right there. And each one of these readings, you can literally dive further by customizing the colors and even the text. So the combinations on this is pretty much endless as well. The final software that I recommend will be your motherboard's software. In this case, since I have an ROG Strix motherboard, the software you want to use is Armory Crate. And Armory Crate will allow you to dive deeper into all of your custom settings of your motherboard. In this case, you can see it already detects the X870E-E gaming Wi-Fi, and I can fine tune everything. I can also control the ROG Astral as well. And you can also utilize your motherboard software's RGB. In this case, ROG uses AuraSync, and here I can change the color settings of anything else that's not detected by the L-Connect software. So for example, we have, of course, the RGB on the actual motherboard itself. We have the RGB colors on our RAM. And finally, the RGB strips on this GPU. Keep in mind that Armory Crate can only detect GPUs in the ASUS family. So if you have a different brand of GPU, you can download their respective software, or you can also utilize a third-party RGB software to control all of the RGB elements in one software. That is completely up to you. I personally like to download each individual software so I can fine-tune it. That's a personal preference for me. Right over here, all of these devices are detected in sync. If I go to Aura Effects, I can quickly select any one of these custom settings. There's even advanced effects as well. But if I want to quickly set each color to a purplish pinkish color, I click on that and they're all synced. So now the RGB light from the GPU, the RG logo, and the RAM, they all change at the same time. So that is pretty much very convenient for me. So building any Corsair 3500X has been an awesome experience, and I hope I covered almost everything you need to build yourself a gaming PC. As a solo creator that does everything from filming and editing, these videos take a long time to make, so I hope I earned a subscribe from you and gave you the confidence in starting your own Corsair 3500X gaming PC. As always, all components will be listed down below, along with affiliate links that do help and support my channel. And finally, I want to thank you and all of my followers who spend their time watching my videos and supporting my content. It means a lot. Hit that subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Firewolf out.